On this vast, open, treeless prairie, the immigrants made their new homes under difficulties. At night, the howling of the coyote, the hooting of the owl, and the barking of the prairie dogs could be heard. Drought, storm, and grasshoppers could not daunt the real pioneer spirit of the settlers. They had come here for religious freedom, and for it they sacrificed and labored and endured. Elder A.J. Dick wrote those words in 1949 about the Mennonite pioneers of central Kansas. The founding families of Buhler Mennonite Church came to the United States in 1874 from what was then South Russia and is now part of southeastern Ukraine. Most of them were Dutch Mennonites, formerly from Prussia, now Poland, who had moved to South Russia, forming what was called the Molochna Colony. Many of the villages and the original buildings of the Molochna Colony still exist today. The majority of the founding families were members of the prominent Mennonite Church located in the village Alexandervol in the Molochna Colony. In July of 1874, most all of the Alexandervol congregation migrated to America. Many of the group settled in the Gossel, Kansas area, establishing the existing Alexandervol Mennonite Church. Several families settled in Henderson, Nebraska, while the remaining group, under the guidance of Elder Dietrich Geddert, settled in and around the Inman-Buhler area west of Turkey Creek. Members of this group became the founding members of Hoffnungsau Mennonite Church, and then later the daughter congregations of Inman Mennonite Church and Buhler Mennonite Church. It is important to remember why an entire village or church of people left their homeland en masse for a new land. Dietrich Geddert, the first elder, or Älteste, of Hoffnungsau, wrote the first history of Hoffnungsau Mennonite Church. The account was written in German longhand into the initial pages of the Hoffnungsau Record Book, Volume 1. The original copy is located in the Bethel College archives. The history is entitled Kurze Chronik, a short history. Elder Geddert's history reflected in length why Mennonites decided to leave South Russia. For Geddert, there was a primary reason for leaving. He wrote that nationalism and, quote, the militarization which was sweeping Europe was also coming into Russia. This struck directly at the center of our faith, since we were believers in non-resistance, unable to take part in military training or service. A glimpse of the often heated and difficult debates that followed is recorded in the Kurze Chronik, as Elder Geddert writes, quote, naturally the question was now, Lord, what would you have us do? For the answer to this question, the Book of Truth was eagerly searched. Answers were found variously, but all seemed to say clearly, follow me, according to Matthew 9:9, Luke 9:23, Matthew 8:22, and John chapter 10, verses 27 and onward. In the earlier period of Russia's remilitarization program, the talk everywhere where there were Mennonites centered around what now? Two options seemed to evolve. One, to leave Russia and to flee from the encroaching danger that threatened our faith, following what our Lord said in Luke 21:36. Or, two, to stay in Russia, even if it meant that we might need to give our lives for our faith, as so many of our forefathers had done. The thinking on this question was divided. Some said, if we place ourselves in the situation of which Jesus speaks in Luke 14:28, we feel we are ill-equipped to pay this price. Therefore, we take with thankful hearts the further words of our Lord in Matthew 10:23, when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. Others presented yet different points of view. They said this was evidence of too much small a faith if we pick up and leave. One must have faith and be ready to stand up for such faith regardless of the consequences and not flee from it. Increasingly, we seem to move towards the conclusion that we should move to a different place. End of quote. The decision to leave was not easy. but after many heart-wrenching farewells, the group traveled by train to Hamburg, Germany, in July of 1874. What heart-rending hours made up these days of leaving, waving white kerchiefs and a final goodbye, wrote Dietrich Geddert. Transportation costs with the Hamburg American trip ranged from $27 to $46. The Teutonia, a converted coal ship, according to several accounts, was very crude and had unsatisfactory accommodations. It set sail August 16, 1874, with a remarkably young group of 1,010 passengers, who were all Mennonites from Moluchna, except for 8 families. On its journey, the ship caught fire, and for a while it seemed as if the vessel with all aboard would be destroyed, and they would perish at sea. On the return trip, however, the ship sank into the depth of the ocean, and our Mennonites were those who had made the last safe journey on it. Reverend A.J. Ratzlaff writes in his memoirs that we did not especially like this ship. It was not a very desirable ship. In addition, it was overfilled, so that comfortable travel was not possible. The salted herring served on the ship were a special treat, but I did not fare as well. Often I felt ill and was frequently dizzy, but I always was able to take meals from the ship's food. Mother could not eat the ship's fare. We had, however, brought from home some toasted bread, ham, and onions, which she was, at times, able to eat. The voyage on the overcrowded ship lasted almost 18 days, landing in New York City, where they were put up in the Castle Gardens before leaving for the West. By October 1874, they arrived in central Kansas. Upon arrival, Elder Dietrich Geddert offered this prayer of thanksgiving. To the great God and Father who guides and protects in such a marvelous way, be glory and praise. He guided over sea and over land. He protected. He sustained. He led us. May His holy will be done. Mrs. J.B. Agatha Ediger reminisced that, quote, the dugout we moved into was a dramatic change from what my grandmother was used to in Russia. She remembered with great longing the comfortable, tree-shaded home they had left in Russia, and she cried at the emptiness and the hardships they had chosen in a new land. The year in which the Mennonites came to Kansas had been called by some the Grasshopper Year. The Kansas City Journal noted years later that the Mennonites came at a time when, quote, nobody wanted to come to Kansas except grasshoppers, and when the whole state was for sale. It went on to write, all the hardships were faced with courage and hard labor to produce a change on the Kansas prairies. Within only a short time there appeared not only wheat fields and cornfields, but orchards and flowers which adorned the pioneer homes. End of quote. Though virtually all the original buildings are gone, these are the same fields and farm locations that we see surrounding the Hoffnungsau community and the Buhler-Inman area today. In the 1870s, Mennonites lived a comfortable and affluent life in Russia, yet issues of faith moved them to give up their lifestyles. What would it take for you to give up your lifestyle for the sake of your faith? What is the, quote, center of our faith, end of quote, that Geddert refers to? Is it still the center of our faith today? Why or why not? And how does knowing this story, this history, shape our future for another 100 years of faithfully following Christ in Buhler, Kansas?